But that was my question to you.
See, the video just started out with you saying that. Just what out loud, Tyler?
But
What the hell's my question to you?
I guess.
It was just perfect timing. I hit record and then all of a sudden it's just Tyler blurting out, what the hell's my question to you?
I didn't watch that back.
Yeah, you're a celebrity, yeah. Welcome to the last of our research cases. Kind of exciting, also a little bit scary from what I've been told. Who knows? But we are at the end. We're going to cover law today, and it should be interesting. Just as a reminder, we are going to have class on Thursday. We're going to be hearing from our speaker, Ken Zico, who's a healthcare attorney and also worked in forensics, a former mentor of mine. We already have some questions put out for him, but I would expect everybody to ask questions as well to kind of get feedback with him. I'm trying to figure out what would be the best way to go about this. I think there's a lot of people who have class right before this, aren't there, with Dr. Caden's class? So I was thinking about just doing this over Zoom, everything over Zoom. But it might just be easier just to meet, and then I can kind of direct the class from here, since we can actually do Zoom with him, but have him Zoom up here. So I think that's what we're going to do, and then I'll just direct the questions as necessary. But yeah, I would expect you to come with questions to ask for Zico. He actually has a lot of stories about me, so if you really want to embarrass me, you can ask questions about what are some embarrassing stories about Dr. Barnes, and he will probably be able to well serve you over there. But yeah. Also, real quick note on the projects. The projects are due. Your deliverable number 3 is due this coming. I believe it's coming Wednesday, or sorry, coming Thursday. I do have some that have already been submitted, and I've looked at them a little bit, but for the most part, I just wanted you to know my plan is on the grading with that, as I'm going to kind of do the aligned grading with the presentation, just so I can kind of see with the work that somebody did and the results of the presentation. So as the people present the fraud scheme, I'm going to be grading the people who are actually did their work through the fraud scheme. It is not required that you complete the entire fraud to get full credit for the presentation, but I am going to take into account what the evidence of effort into putting into the solving the fraud was, and the details relative to what the whole thing is. So say, for example, there were like 5 frauds and you got 1 of them, that's probably not going to be a good look for you. So I don't think that anybody did 5 frauds, by the way, but just for context. But I would like to make sure that there's a diligent effort being done, and there will be grading on kind of my perception of the effort on that. So that's going to be something that you should probably keep in track of. You're in the home stretch, so if you've not solved the fraud yet, you might want to get on top of that. So today, like I said, last presentation. So we're going to ask some questions about bankruptcy as it relates to fraud, business and investment fraud, money laundering, and tax fraud. And so let's get into it, of course. So you probably are familiar with bankruptcies in other classes before, so we're going to talk about some review stuff. Let's just go ahead and get into it. It's kind of a shame. I kind of wanted to have Kyle, given his data research project, to be the leader on this one. But Maddie, you can speak for Kyle. What are the 3 types of bankruptcies? Okay, can you briefly explain what those are for me?
Liquidate their assets as much as possible to pay off their debt, and then the remainder of the debt is forgiven. And Chapter 11 is used for individuals with debt that exceeds the limit of Chapter 13. And then Chapter 13 is for individuals that do not qualify for Chapter 7.
Right. So yeah, so Chapter 7, again, it's called liquidation for individuals. So we can kind of go to the site, liquidation for individuals. One of the key aspects to note about liquidation of individuals when they talk about it from this context is that these are largely no asset cases. So people are declaring bankruptcy because they legitimately have nothing to actually maintain. They cannot afford to pay off any creditors. They cannot afford to pay off any debt. They just literally have nothing. And so this is going to be the majority of bankruptcy filings. So you can kind of see about 500,000 bankruptcy filings in 2024, 60% of those, roughly 60% of those, were Chapter 7. And then majority of those are individual bankruptcy filings. And so, Basically, Chapter 7, keep their property. Most unsecured debt is discharge. Some debts do not go away. It's important to note that one of those is student debt, which hopefully is not a major issue for anybody in this classroom, but that's something that is very, very worth noting, simply because bankruptcy is not a way to alleviate certain types of debt, and student debt is one of those. So yeah, for the most part, this is kind of the common one. This is the one that we talk about the most when we talk about individual bankruptcy. Beyond that, we've got Chapter 13. So Chapter 13 is basically going to be where people with reliable income, but they don't qualify for Chapter 7. So they do have means, but they do have an extraordinary debt that they cannot actually manage. Usually this is going to involve a repayment plan for all debt. It's not going to be necessarily that you repay everything that you owe, but you repay part of what you owe, and then everything else is alleviated. So anything that's unsecured that's left after that is completely discharged, is the idea behind that. And then Chapter 11, this is kind of the one that used to be reserved for businesses. It's going to be increasingly used by individuals with debt that exceeds the limits under Chapter 11. There is no debt cap, but it's going to be something that you're going to have a significant amount. This is one that's significant debts with high incomes used by celebrities, professional athletes, and real estate investors. I thought that was interesting because I would have definitely put celebrities and professional athletes in there. I didn't really think about real estate investors, but it makes sense that if you're kind of doing a sole proprietorship business and you actually have a massive amount of assets and those all of a sudden get turnover, they flip on you, then you probably are going to be in a very bad debt position. But yeah, we tend to see these all the time with celebrities and professional athletes who live well beyond their means, and then their success kind of goes away, and they have to declare bankruptcy. Yeah, so yeah, some very well-known examples of that. All right, let's move on to question number 2. So according to the second resource, what constitutes business and investment fraud? All right, and what are some of the common scams surrounding business investment fraud? Dottie, your group's up on this one.
So business investment trying to convince people to pay by promising low or no risk guaranteed return investments. And some common scams include advanced fee schemes, Nigerian letter schemes, Ponzi schemes, pyramid schemes, or telemarketing fraud schemes.
Good, yeah, good summary of that. And well, it's kind of it's one of those funny things because it's been around now for 20 years, but the kind of the Nigerian prince scheme was what started this whole thing off, the email scheme, and now it's kind of a meme anywhere on there. It's even a joke that was in the TV show The Office. But it's still one of those still one of those schemes that does come up in different forms and different fashion. One of the interesting ones, kind of the schemes that came up way back in the day was the Nigerian print schemes, and talk about these massive returns and these big concerns that you could argue, these big ideas that you can make a lot of money with a little minimal amount of investment. It's interesting because I think these schemes themselves have kind of run their course. A lot of people have kind of understood that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And so kind of the threat schemes have become a little bit more commonplace. Has anybody received the Easy Pass text recently? Yeah, I see a lot of people nodding their heads and raising their hands. Yeah, so that one kind of made me do a double take because I actually travel on the turnpike in Oklahoma when I go back and visit home, and I thought, oh, that's really weird because I have a Pike Pass that actually pays it for me. I guess it didn't trigger, and then I thought, oh, it's not Pike Pass, it's Easy Pass. And so yeah, some interesting schemes in that vein, in that history. But yeah, when we talk about the business investment schemes, the business investment schemes tend to be a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more focused on we can actually give you major returns, and we've seen a lot of those in recent history, especially in the past 20 years. We're going to talk a little bit about some of those here in just a little bit, especially with this respect to securities fraud. All right, third resource, how is money laundering defined, and what are the 3 typical phases of money laundering? All right, so Megan, what your group come up with on this one?
Money laundering is the process used by criminals in an attempt to hide the illegal source of income by passing money through complex transactions to clean it. And then the 3 phases are initial entry or placement, layering, and final entry.
Good. Okay. So initial entry and placement, and we can kind of see this on the screen right here. Initial movement of the amount of money earned from the criminal activities to some legitimate financial network or institution. So basically, we take money that is not clean and we put it into a source that is basically going to be a generation of clean funds. Then layering is a continuing transfer of money through transactions, forms, and investments enterprise to make sure virtually impossible to trace the money back to its legal origin. So the whole purpose of having a business is that you can actually integrate the money that you have through this fraud scheme and come in and through whatever illegal enterprise you had, and you can put it into the business, and it's very difficult to detect which is legitimate funds and which are illegitimate funds. And then the final integration is when it's freely used legally without the necessity to conceal it further. Basically, it comes out of the business as a legitimate profit, and then it's used to spend. And so, I think that this is an interesting one. A lot of people do not understand money laundering, and they kind of make it much more challenging than it actually is, which is really important because we have to think about to understand something, we have to understand what the nature of it is. Is anybody familiar with the movie Office Space? Yeah, so there's a scene in Office Space where they're trying to figure out how to launder their illegally gained money, and there's like saying, "I don't know how to do money laundering," and they were all college-educated individuals, very very smart, and then they tried to hire a guy to help them, and basically he didn't know anything about money laundering either. He was just anyway. I'm getting off track, but a lot of thought about money laundering, which apparently this is not a resource that existed on the internet back when the movie was originally made, because this seems pretty straightforward. But we're going to stretch our wings, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we would approach this if we were in the situation that we need to launder illegal proceeds, which I'm really looking forward to seeing what the creative solutions that this class came up with are. All right. So let's go ahead. Before we do that, let's get back into the fraudulent bankruptcy scheme. So question number 4 says, the numerous fraudulent bankruptcy schemes according to the Fraud Examiner's Manual. So the ones that talked about are concealed assets. That was one of the big ones. That's when somebody's declaring bankruptcy, but they don't want to declare that they've got certain assets that could be used to pay off the bankruptcy. So they try to disguise those assets. That was one that's kind of the big one, most common type of bankruptcy fraud scheme. Concealment of assets rightfully belonging to the debtor's estate and avoid forfeiting the assets in bankruptcy. So basically, you have assets, and then that comes up in the case, and so you try to avoid that being declared in the bankruptcy. There's another one that is kind of interesting here. They got several of them listed out as far as multiple filings, credit card bust out, forged filings, and typing services of petition mills that all have their areas in with respect to bankruptcy. So the one that I thought was interesting is the plan bust out. And so plan bust out is basically they're trying to plan for a bankruptcy to occur, which sounds kind of silly, unless you've actually ever heard of The Producers. Has anybody ever seen the movie The Producers and the musical The Producers? I won't spoil it for you, but basically it's about a Broadway musical that's supposed to be so incredibly bad that it's going to close the first night after opening. And the producers of the play are going to take all the proceeds that were donated to actually create this musical, and they were just going to run off with it. So it was a planned bankruptcy, kind of a planned bust out, similar to this idea, which is interesting. It's a fascinating thought that you basically plan to fail and you actually are successful from it. I actually recently came across a video that said this actually happens quite frequently in Hollywood and with cinema and media, simply because it's an easy vehicle to use, given that the advanced amount of proceeds that a lot of times go into these things. By the way, if you ever do want to watch The Producers, whether the movie or musical, I won't spoil it for you, but it's not entirely just about a plan bust out. There's a lot more to it than that. But I don't want anybody basically saying Dr. Barnes is doing spoilers again for us and it's just ruining my life. Okay. I only do spoilers when it comes to The Office. I'm sorry, guys. Okay. I only do spoilers when it comes to The Office. All right. Question number 5. Select an example of securities fraud that took place in the past decade. What type of scam did this fraud represent? What are some warning signs that suggest this opportunity was fraudulent? So yeah, there's quite a bit that we can select from here, but let's actually drill into a few examples and see what you all came up with. Jenna, what was your group's pick for a securities fraud? Mm.
And so some of the warning signs was a lot of that it was brought that it happened after the fact. Senators either sold stock that tanked soon after the news of COVID, or they bought stock that had dramatic increases in value after COVID.
Yeah, okay. I didn't realize that was something happening out of COVID. I didn't catch that in the news. I know that there was one that was very recent. MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene's in a lot of hot water because of her trading activity right before the tariff announcements. So yeah, kind of some interesting stuff there. But what type of fraud would you say that did your group identify that took place? What type of scam was that? Sorry. Yeah, what would that fall into? Like I don't know if that cleanly falls into one of these schemes over here. Then again, it's kind of not necessarily a good alignment there, but I was curious if it fell into one of these categories here. It's an interesting question. I don't know. It kind of say if it's insider trading, then it probably doesn't fall within that. All right, that's an interesting one. John, what'd your group come up with?
We just used the Theranos. So,
How dare you? How dare you use a course that you already know? That's actually the one I used to. So yeah,
we
all right.
We've invested in all product on investments for Theranos. Misleading the product, they big millions secretive in the workplace. And for its highs in community and low visits or access. Warning signs not showing investors the real product, people investing in that deal without seeing how the product works firsthand.
Yeah, good. So anybody who's in the audit class is going to know Theranos, and some of you may actually know about Theranos outside of it, but big securities fraud scheme because basically they didn't have a product. They were trying to present a business that was presenting this this world-changing product, but it didn't actually work or really exist. So they tried to fake it until they make it, and then they never actually made it, but they faked it for better on a part of a decade. I classified this one as an advanced fee scheme. I don't know that it was technically advanced fee scheme, simply because I think they had the intention of trying to create a product. Elizabeth Holmes is a bit delusional, but the fact that they never actually made a product kind of makes the fact that there was nothing there. There was nothing there. All right, Lotus, what did your group identify?
I would turn in a short period of time to suggest fraud because that's not how the market works. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Okay, and so this one's pretty easy. What type of scam was that one? That was the epitome of a Ponzi scheme. So what'd your group identify as far as opportunities for warning signs to suggest the opportunity is fraudulent? It's just that it's too good to be true.
But always be like flashing warning sign.
Yeah. And it's very interesting because this was a period of time when there was a lot of problems going on with other businesses, and they were still generating consistently higher returns. So during that period of time, the fact that they were generating high returns should have been a very, very big warning sign. Some other issues that I identified as far as warning signs: lack of transparency, lack of technical expertise, and management of the board, and just the nature of the business itself, the culture that the business generates, and what they represent. This is kind of an embodiment of Theranos, obviously, but you can look at this an example of WorldCom and Enron were both examples of that as well. I think you probably, if you knew a little bit more about Madoff, I think Madoff actually had a very similar workplace scenario as well. But yeah, good examples. All right. All right, here comes the fun part. All right, assume that you spent the past 5 years providing illegal exam materials to Truman State University instructors, and now you want to ride off into the sunset with your ill-gotten gains. Develop a scheme to launder your fraudulent proceeds. Be sure to explain each phase of the process. So there were 3 phases of the process that we talked about before: initial entry or placement, layering, and final integration. So you basically need to explain what it is that you're doing to actually launder your money. I don't know how much money you can get off of illegal exam materials, given that you're talking about a limited audience. But let's assume that it's a sizable amount of money. Okay, sizable amount of money. All right, I think I'm going to call on all the groups for this one because I'm just very interested in what you all came up with. So we'll start out. Maddie, what did your group come up with?
Have people be able to join. And then for layering, we would have Olivia withdraw the money to buy iPads for our tutoring club. And then we would eventually decide to return them, which they would give us clean money for those.
Very, very good. Okay. Okay. Good, and I like how you actually had Olivia do that. That way, if somebody gets caught, Olivia's the only one who gets the blame, and so, yeah. So, yeah, I'll risk reward. Did you have a flip a coin or try to like, figure who this person was, or did Olivia volunteer? Okay. Stick with the team. Good for you, Olivia. All right. Dottie, what'd your group identify?
Said that we could start by setting up a legitimate business and doing activities like a tutoring business. And you could funnel the money into that business as if it were part of the income. And you set up other legitimate looking businesses and start routing money between those businesses several times. And working cash as much as possible. And distribution to those businesses.
All right, so multi-layer scheme where you have multiple businesses, so it's harder to track just according to a single business. Okay, we got some fraudsters in the making. Fantastic. Or at least money launderers in the making. That's less critical. Yeah. All right, Megan, what'd your group say? Yeah.
Transferred around, and then for layering, you would invest it into legitimate investment accounts and then spend the interest.
All right, well, good job. Jenna, what'd your group say?
They're in like I guess the money into transactions like with like legitimate transactions like foods, I guess. And then through integration with then invest into C3s for them to open a location in Kirksville and selling, I guess, the investment money from that.
Oh, that'd be easy because I'd eat there every night. So yeah, you'd make up your money in like a number of weeks. Yeah. I don't know, the casino boat I'm not sure it would be sanctioned if it was on the in Kirksville Lake, but then again, I'd more be worried about whether or not the Kirksville Mafia would come after you. I don't know. Has anybody ever heard of the Amish Mafia? And wasn't there a TV show about that for a while? Yeah. So yeah, that's certainly a risk, but very creative, very well done. John, what'd your group say?
You said we'd have a tutoring gig on the side, we'll place the money, or the fake money with the fake clients. The money would be from a legal examiner, would be received as income from the tutoring services. Then we said we'd give family members the money and have them transfer it to their own personal accounts and to our fake employees' accounts, which we control. And then we said we'd invest the money into real estate or buy luxury goods.
See, that way it's not just Olivia taking the hit, it's the family members taking the hit this time if something bad happens. So yeah, there we go. Yeah, all right, there we go. Yeah, okay, well done. And then Lotus, last up, what you got?
That far into it, we were just like, well, we have to buy prepaid Visa cards and then they can't trace where the money came from.
So yeah, just basically we don't need to worry about layering because we just say everything goes into the prepaid Visa cards and then those are going to be currency of their own. So yeah, I think it would be really there's not really the layering part would be problematic because they could be directly tracked, I think. But other than that, it's a scheme that other fraudsters use. So there's something to be said about that. All right. Well, obviously, it's all fun and good to think about how we're going to commit money laundering, but it doesn't really serve a purpose unless we actually have some lesson behind this. So we're talking about fraud prevention and awareness in this course. And so let's go back to the question. And what are some ways the money laundering schemes may be rendered detected? So I'm not going to have all the groups talk about this. We'll just start back with Maddie again. And what did your group say as far as prevention and detection of your scheme?
Really great for e-tutoring. And then for prevention, Walmart would notice that we return iPads.
So had you thought about the possibility that you could loop Sydney into this fraud scheme and say, Sydney, you could just downgrade the quality of your tutoring. That way they think they need more tutoring better. I mean, Sydney is a rational human being. And if you cut her into the proceeds, yeah. Yeah, it's a possibility. It's a possibility. Yeah. I mean, the more people that you loop into the fraud, then the worse, the better chance it is going to be discovered. So yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. What about prevention and detection? Dottie, what did your group say?
So maybe Truman State needs to crack down and prevent professors from obtaining these illegal exam materials in the first place. And then for detection, like investigators, legitimate side of the businesses and compare it like to what their income should be. Look for discrepancies in tutoring, like how many students did you actually tutor, how much is the session was actually making.
And so I think that this comes down to a problem that we have run into. So we think about it from a macro perspective. We tend to use the word transparency very loosely, and that's one thing that we think about and say businesses should have all transparency. But is that very common in small businesses, particularly in like privately held businesses? And so if we need to understand whether or not we suspect a particular business to be a front for a problem, then there needs to be some sort of transparency for that. And I don't know if there's any way to actually enforce that. So transparency is certainly going to be kind of the biggest prevention, but if we're talking about small business operations, that may be a problem. Largely, we're going to rely on detection, and so probably we're going to rely on regulatory authorities that are going to be over law enforcement. I think in the U.S. that'd be the FBI and the IRS, although more just the FBI nowadays, given IRS's situation. And internationally, the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF. So yeah, I do think that money laundering is less of a problem than it used to be, but then again, we did have the issue with last week or a couple weeks ago, as technically now we're talking about the Binance that was kind of supporting money laundering. It may actually be a less of a problem with legitimate, or with, I shouldn't say legitimate currency, with physical currency, but with digital currencies, we may be seeing a whole new trend now, and so that's going to be something to keep an eye out for. All right. Well, many tax fraud schemes are perpetrated taxpayers. There are some where the taxpayers are the victims themselves. How can taxpayers protect themselves from being victims, not willful participants of tax fraud? All right. See, Megan, what'd your group say on this one?
You said one thing was to keep like super detailed record and remain diligent in checking like your own information, protecting your personal information, and doing a lot of research to choose like your tax preparer.
Okay. And so, yeah, I think that when we talk about tax fraud, oftentimes we're talking about things we're talking about situations where somebody impersonating a government agency or somebody acting on behalf of a tax preparer does something that's not in their best interest. Okay, so we talked about the example of the tax preparer earlier in the semester who was working on behalf as a CPA or worked for a CPA, worked as a CPA, and actually filed a whole bunch of false tax claims for the individuals they represented. There's also situations where governmental agencies are kind of, they don't exist, but people pretend they exist. One of the examples that I talked about many times is where my father received a call from the IRS saying that he was going to be taken to jail if he didn't pay his taxes. And so what are some concerns in that area? And obviously making sure that you have knowledge, good education and understanding of that area, making sure that the people who are the taxpayers understand. A good tax preparer, good professional in that area should be able to provide a high level of transparency. And I know that that's something that the VITA program tries to do here, is that whenever people are preparing the taxes for the individuals, they say, here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm doing this. So that actually provides some level of understanding for the people who are doing that. But beyond the transparency, if we're talking about the people who are going to be most likely prey for the individuals that are going to commit these schemes, what population do we think this is going to mostly apply to? Probably the uneducated, older individuals, people who are going to be less aware of what's preparing for them. So that may be a situation where we have individuals acting on behalf of those on those. So intervention of trusted individuals, family, friends who can aid in the determination. It's very interesting because that does create a slippery slope. We talked about it earlier this semester. Does everybody remember the discussion of elder fraud? Yeah, so aid of intervention of other individuals can be very beneficial in case of external fraud, but also intervention creates an opportunity for people who might actually prey on others. So say, for example, that you have a family friend or a family member who says, I'm going to take care of grandma and make sure that she doesn't fall prey to individuals, then that person may actually be put in a position that they could actually take advantage of grandma as well. And so that's always something to be aware of. And so maybe multiple parties in the process just to make sure that there's no problems that exist in that. I don't think there's a good answer, unfortunately, for that particular situation, but it is something that you need to keep aware of. It's fortunately many decades off for everybody in this room except for one person. So, and I may be calling on somebody to watch over my finances Maybe not. No, who knows? It depends. Given the skill that you all perpetrate fraud in this class, I may be a little bit more wary of anybody in this class to take care of that. All right, last question. Jenna, in your personal opinion, which is the bigger crime, tax fraud or taxation itself? Okay, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, yeah. The businesses should actually pay the servers a living wage. Yeah, so yeah, that makes sense. Tipping culture. Yeah. Obviously, that was a tongue-in-cheek question, but it works out that this is the last question for the semester. All right, let's take a quiz. What do you say? Let's take the last quiz of the semester.
All right, we had the two men like Nigerian scheme.
Overview, the two Nigerian men, their names are displayed on the screen. Were sentenced in Boston federal court. They were doing a bunch of pretty naughty things. First of which was defrauding, I think, COVID unemployment fraud or unemployment handouts they were giving. And also they got a little romantic with some people online during COVID when they were lonely and stole money. Well, I guess stealing probably isn't the best word, but defrauded them of their money through these romantic scams.
Now for the sentencing convictions, Henry and God's Power, both sentenced to 78 months, 72 months. They're convicted of bank fraud, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering.
And then this is just like a quote from the attorney in the case. And his last name is Levy, and Eugene Levy. So now for the details of the scheme, they created fake companies and identities using false passports. They also opened bank accounts to receive the proceeds, and then which was over $2 million. And then also their funds primarily came from, like Dylan mentioned, the romance scams and then the pandemic unemployment fraud.
So as we know from the quiz, romance scams was where they got most of their money. So if you weren't aware, they're building fake relationships online to gain people's trust and then manipulate them into sending money their way. And so it's just like, as Dylan said, like the loneliness and the illusion of love was used to exploit victims. So like catfishing essentially, and that's my dad with the catfish.
That's all.
All right.
You wanna do pressure first?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is our presentation.
So yeah, just looking at the fraud triangle for this case, for the pressure, I mean, they have to make money somehow. And with the, pandemic's effect on the economy, they're gonna look at some less conventional terms of making that money, so.
So for opportunity, there was, pandemic assistance available for people. And older people tend to be a little more trusting on the internet than they probably should be. And then for rationalization, I mean, the government is just giving out this money and also they worked so hard to gain this trust and affection. This is just compensation for that.
So lessons learned, don't donate your money on the internet or even just give it to people you don't know online. And that's even buying products or services on the internet. Unless you know it's real, don't do it. Kind of warn your grandparents about common scams like the Nigerian prince or people just trying to love you on the internet. Anything someone says on the internet can be false, so don't just trust it. Then call your grandparents. They're lonely. They'd rather talk to you and give you money than someone random on the internet.
What do you think the age range is for somebody to fall prey for this?
65 plus.
65 plus. Okay, good. I got a few years.
It is nice. How, we want us to talk about.
Was it? I remember I was on the, what happened, you were on that, I just can't remember who's on people.
I mean, I was one, at least one of the people. I think all of them, maybe the other two.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Alright, so we had the social media securities fraud. And just to start, these are half of the people who perpetrated this fraud. We did pull most of these pictures from their Twitter or X profile, so they are actually them.
I can't believe you didn't pull Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell. That would have been amazing. Does anybody know this, what Saved by the Bell is in this generation? Yeah.
So he went by Zach Morris, but his name is actually Edward. So his real name's at the top, but he went by Zach. That's what all of his social media handles are.
That's a much more
Um,
unique name for me.
Yeah, so his name's Edward. We had PJ, John, Gary, and then
And then here's our second half, and we have Stefan, Mitchell, Daniel, and Tom. You can follow them on Twitter if you want.
their accounts are still active.
Tom looks like a prospect.
All right, going into what these people did, they did the classic pump and dump scheme, which I heard used to be Dr. Barnes' nickname.
What was your letter grade again?
Sorry about that one. So they used their social media presence to hype up interest in insecurities by posting false and misleading information to pump the prices of the securities. They use their social media to seem like skilled stock traders by posting pictures of their profits and their extravagant lifestyles, encouraging people to share their financial gains with them. They collectively had 1.5 million followers on Twitter, and they also ran an online community for stock traders called Atlas, which was one of the largest free online communities in the world at the time. And so they concealed their intent to dump the shares later after inflating the prices by hyping them up. And then they maximized their profits at the expense of their followers. And from January 2020 to April 2022, they profited at least $114 million from the scheme.
So this was just an example of like some of the tweets. It was hard to find because it's been so many years back in like 2021 and 2022 when it was like all blowing up. But they did have a podcast where they talk about all the stuff. So that's just an example of a tweet of like them promoting their podcast. And then just some more example tweets from all the different people. And then for the aftermath, basically they were all charged criminally and civilly, but then the criminal case got dropped because they didn't think prosecution did a good enough job of saying anyone was really, I guess, harmed the victim's property rights. So that was dropped except for Dan Knight, which is the guy in jail down there, except he actually went to jail. I think he's under house arrest right now. He admitted guilt, so he kind of didn't get his case dropped because he already said he did it. And then, so that's what they were charged with, conspiracy to commit securities fraud. And then that's just an example of a tweet of our favorite Mr. Zach Morris. Him saying SEC's most wanted, and flipping off the camera. And that's who brought on the court case. So obviously they're taking this very seriously. But yeah.
And then these are just some of the tweets and like updates to their bios, like kind of after they got caught. It's a lot of just disclaimers that their opinions only, not actual advice. And these are from their bios. So. That's it.
So we did the fraud triangle for the securities fraud scheme.
Alright, so
Opportunity, they had a very large following on Twitter. And they were doing it primarily through online platforms. There's not much regulation through with, at the time, there wasn't much regulation with online crypto platforms and whatnot. The pressure, they're money influencers, they need to keep up appearances. Once you're a money influencer, you can't really stop living a lavish lifestyle. Doesn't work like that. They might have had debt obligations, that's speculation. There might have been peer pressure, kind of as the first one. And, they can buy 50 out. The rationalization, they just wanted money. And you want money and, people are gonna give it to you, why not? And 8 of them got convicted, so it's kind of easy to fall into the group think of, well, everybody else is doing it, why not?
So some lessons learned from this, influencers aren't to be trusted. In the long,
Blanket statement.
yeah. It's pretty easy to find securities fraud in the long run. It's kind of hard to hide it, especially if you're online and like your stuff, what you're saying is out there forever. So just don't do it. And if you have a large follower base, like a lot of these individuals did, you have a responsibility to your followers and to give them real and like trustworthy information. And then the stock market is largely speculative. So just be aware of most of the time it's people's opinions. So just be informed and know what you're investing in. That's it.
Yeah, I remember who that was gonna be. The results. Okay.
I'm doing some deals. So yeah, we did ours on former civilian employees sentenced to 50 years in federal prison for $100 million scheme. Shoot. There you go.
So the key parties, the main perpetrator is Janet Yamanaka Mello. She worked for the US Army for the Child and Youth Services as a financial program manager, so she kind of just like gave out grants and deemed like who deserved these grants. And she was also founder of the Child Health and Youth Lifelong Development, which was her fake non-for-profit that she funneled money into. The US Attorney's Office led the prosecution and the IRS criminal investigation investigated her finances.
Yeah, so the fraud happened from 2016 to 2023. And saying she created a fictitious non-for-profit called the CHYLCD or CHYLD. And she basically used her position as a manager to falsely secure grants, and especially from the 4-H military partnership grant, which was meant to support military children and families. And she does this fraud scheme 49 times, and this ultimately she got 108 million out of it. She used that money to buy cars, homes, jewelry, other extravagant items.
So the results there, she was eventually caught by the IRS when they saw her lavish lifestyle didn't align up with what she was actually supposed to be making. She failed to accurately report her income tax for 2017 all the way to 2022. She betrayed the trust of government agency and repeatedly lied about where she's getting the money. She got sentenced to 15 years, 180 months in prison, and 5 counts of mail fraud, 5 counts of filing false tax returns.
Thank you.
So we had the same topic and we have the fraud triangle.
So for the opportunity, like last group mentioned, she had access to grant applications and the whole approval process due to the fact that she was higher up. And she exploited her role to create a fake organization, and the organization had no oversight, which gave her the opportunity to commit the fraud.
So for rationalization, she was able to rationalize that she deserved the money, you know, she works hard at her job. Why shouldn't she make $108 million? No one will notice the money in the grand scheme of things, 108 million. And, you know, I guess it's not that much, but when you're comparing, you know, to other government agencies, pressure, she had the pressure to keep up with the Joneses, you know, live a lavish lifestyle, have a nice car, big house, you know, go on vacation.
480 nice cars.
Yes.
Alrighty, and so lessons and solutions, the government should have more checks in place to verify that they're sending money to legitimate organizations. And they should do like means tests on government employees in positions like this to see if they are living outside of their income. Yeah.
How much of the 108 million should we give her just for the acronym child alone? That was a pretty clever acronym, I think, yeah. So maybe like what, 50 million of that she deserves just for the acronym? Maybe less, maybe less. All right, we are back in on Thursday for our Zoom visitor. I'll see y'all then.